So we can differentiate how the different drugs that I used in the past, how they differentiate in terms of effects, and perhaps trying to describe to someone who hasn't used them personally, but yet is curious, what the different highs are like. And then I also talk about like what the different addictions are like, what the different cycles of use are like, and whatnot. But we can also go into like how the cravings for these different drugs are feel different and are characterized in different ways. Um, because yeah, like you think almost naively, it's like yes, people crave drugs, yeah, obviously, but like the word craving, it takes on a different nature for different substances. So in this video, I kind of just want to go over how craving, how these different types of cravings for different drugs feel different and are different. Okay, alcohol. What is it like to crave alcohol? Well, I've talked in old videos about different loops of addiction, I call them. And the loop of addiction with alcohol abuse is essentially, or at least for most people, that you start drinking heavily, you start abusing alcohol to try and control your emotions. You're overwhelmed with your emotions. You don't like feeling emotions, and the alcohol temporarily helps you with that. So people drink to avoid emotion, but then a side effect of alcohol abuse is that it actually makes you more emotional. It's a depressant. It brings out all of this stuff like I'll just say, for example, like as a person who, I'm not like, it's not in my nature. I'm not saying this to be tough or anything. It's just not in my nature to cry when I'm upset. I'm more of like someone who gets anxiety and paralysis and stuff than someone who cries as a defense or mechanism or whatever. But when I was abusing alcohol at times, like I was crying all the time because yeah, that's just what it does to you. So that's the loop of addiction with alcohol, is that you take alcohol to treat your emotions, and then as a side effect, the alcohol only makes the emotional situation worse, which then you want to drink more for. So craving alcohol is essentially like it's craving a mental state where you think you'll be okay with your emotions. And that's deceptive, yes, because you're never really okay. But like, if you're stuck in the loop of alcohol addiction and you think about going a night without alcohol, it's like you're terrified, because that means it's almost like it's less about actually drinking and getting drunk as it is, laying there 100% sober with your own thoughts and fears and emotions. That's what's terrifying. So craving alcohol is like synonymous to craving some type of emotional control, um, where you'll be able to fall asleep and continue on with life or whatever. So yeah, an alcohol craving during alcohol addiction is essentially a craving for some type of illusion of emotional control. It's not that different from heroin, but heroin, well, we'll get to heroin. Okay, marijuana. I don't know. Like, I don't actually ever crave marijuana. Like, it's okay, so when I was young, college age, and I first started smoking weed, yeah, like, and I look back at this and I just shake my head. But then again, like, I tell myself, don't be embarrassed about it because you were young and everyone goes through it. We all go through that phase when we first start smoking weed that we think it's the most profound thing ever, and we love it, and we're almost giving it like a religious status or whatever, the Church of Cannabis or whatever. And I remember being a freshman in college, and I went out and I bought this tapestry and hung it in the doorway. I was sharing, or no, it wasn't my freshman year. It was a later year. I can't remember which. I had a roommate though, and we had a doorway in the middle of our unit, and I had this tapestry that was a big pot leaf that you'd have to walk through, like the beads and everything. You'd have to walk through it to get into my room. And I was like, stupid, like, oh, I like weed, I'm gonna buy one of these stupid tapestries. Like, again, how stupid. Like, I make fun of people who do that kind of stuff now. Well, not really, but I get it. But yeah, like, I remember when my roommate's dad came to visit, like, I didn't even think that it might be a little awkward for him to see the fact that his son is rooming with some guy who's advertising the fact that he's a stoner. Like, I remember meeting my roommate's dad. Like, he literally had to part the tapestry to extend his hand out to shake mine. And it's just like, I don't know. It's just so stupid. Like, this is a tangent, I know, but like, maybe that guy saw the tapestry and was like, oh yeah, these kids are young. I went through the same thing when I'm in college. Maybe, or maybe not. In the maybe not case, it's just embarrassing, but yes. So, later in life, though, what's it like to crave weed? Well, I don't really smoke weed very often at all in the past 8 years or whatever. And if it happens, it's like I'm not one of those people who can smoke weed and then sit around and eat Doritos and watch movies and laugh or whatever. It makes me extremely introspective and extremely reflective. Seeing yourself in the second and third person or whatever, almost like a very light version of psychedelics, which is another thing that, like, I don't know, like people who dedicate their whole lives to weed, when you have psychedelics out there, like psychedelics, I don't know, like you smoke enough weed, I get bored of weed. Like you just get bored of it. Whereas like you could take psychedelics every day and you would never ever have a boring day. But weed just gets boring over time. I'm not again, like I'm not, I understand the benefits of it, again, like introspection and self-improvement by way of seeing yourself in the second, third person. That's where weed comes into its own. And the best weed highs in my experience are ones where, like, say you haven't smoked for a year. You take a completely year away from weed and you improve your life during that year. And then you smoke weed, and in that high state, you reflect on how you've improved your life. And if you're someone who's really hard on themselves, perhaps in that high state, you actually give yourself the permission to be a bit proud of yourself or where you've come. That kind of weed high, I think, is the absolute best weed high you can get. But again, it's the kind of thing that, the fact that weed, that it gets boring and that it's only beneficial when used sparingly, at least for me personally, like that knowledge it makes me not crave it, because it's like, I see it as like, some type of tutoring or mentor. It's kind of a weird way to put it, but like, I'd crave it in the same way that I would crave like, anything I might do once in a while to try and improve my life or whatever. And yeah, just more on the whole weed worship thing. Like weed, like the appreciation and it's like an infatuation. Like people who say that they love weed and they see it as like this religious thing, or again, it's just, I don't, I mean, you take drugs like, I don't know, maybe, okay, this is something that maybe people don't, I've never said this, so nobody would not know it or whatever, but like, I've never, ever used edible marijuana products, ever. I've never eaten brownies, I've never eaten gummy bears, I've never done any of that stuff. It's just been smoking weed. So I don't know if the higher doses of that kind of stuff would be more transcendental or whatever, but for me at least, it's like the more weed you smoke in one session, it only leads to paranoia and whatnot. It doesn't lead to anything that's more profound necessarily for me. Whereas like psychedelic doses, it's like, it goes from threshold to intermediate to, very, very profound religious experiences and stuff. So it's like an appreciation for psychedelics is like a love. It's like a true love, whereas obsession with weed, it's like an infatuation. So think of it just in terms of like being infatuated with another person versus being in love with another person. I don't know, like I just don't understand why people are obsessed with weed in the same way that others are obsessed with psychedelics. Okay, I'll stop talking about this now. We can talk about crack cocaine specifically. The strongest drug cravings that you'll ever feel in your life, at least of like an immediate nature, would be like something you had, like a drug like crack cocaine that wears off in 5 minutes, and like the acute craving phase that you go into once the high wears off, where like you're just obsessed with the idea of reviving the high, and you just feel completely broken and in ruins unless you can get to that high state back. And again, in a half hour or an hour, like you stop the obsessing, but the cravings that you get that lock you into that immediate want to smoke until my bank account's drained or want to smoke until it runs out, whatever, those cravings that you get in the immediacy after coming down from like a crack high. I don't think there's no other drug that I felt that has that kind of a immediate crash with associated craving. Yeah, it's just really intense. Craving heroin. So it's like, I mean, obviously there's the physical cravings for heroin. I'm not really talking about physical cravings in this video. This is more like the psychological processes that one goes through. I've covered what physical heroin addiction is like in other videos, but Okay, so if you say you're someone who has like bad eyesight and you can't see anything, and then you go and you get either you get glasses or you get eye surgery, and suddenly you can see. Well, no, the more apt analogy would be glasses because you can take your glasses off. So you take your glasses off, you can't see anything. You put your glasses on, you can see and you can survive and function and everything. Heroin is like that for the most essential part of your what feels like the most essential part of a human being. Like you're stumbling through life unfocused and unable to operate as you wish that you could or whatever, and then you get that heroin in you and you feel that calmness and that ability to function without the chatter and the ability to just feel, walk, behave, think, whatever, like the proverbial normal person in society would. Once you feel that, it becomes your crutch, and you're always going to be craving heroin as like the level 10 version of how someone who can't find his glasses needs to find his glasses so he can go drive to work and whatever. You need to find heroin to be able to function because once you've discovered heroin, life without heroin is like, another thing to think about it. Like you see something on the news, like man has limbs blown off in a war and becomes a quadriplegic, and a lot of us are like, I wouldn't even want to live as a quadriplegic. I would probably just kill myself in that if that were to happen, because what would life be if you didn't have limbs? Like you couldn't do anything and you couldn't enjoy anything and you would just be sitting there helpless all the time. You feel the same way once you've gone into heroin addiction, like, and thinking about what life would be like if you no longer had heroin. It literally feels like a world that you would never be able to go forward and live in, and a world that would essentially just be a challenge of your courage to finally kill yourself or whatever. So heroin addiction, yeah, it's just chasing. It's chasing. Just like the ultimate medication in order to, survive in this world. Craving benzodiazepines. Craving benzodiazepines, that's this weird thing. It's like craving a placebo effect. And let me explain that. Okay, so you have like a certain. I'm very critical of benzodiazepines because I think a lot of people, maybe not in 2020, but in the past when I was growing up, everyone was prescribed them and very few people actually needed them. Yes, there are a select minority of people in society who really can medically benefit from benzodiazepines used responsibly. But here's the thing, like when you use benzodiazepines responsibly, you don't get high, you don't get a high, it's not recreational, it's stabilizing. In the same way that like, any other type of like non-recreational medicine, would just be stabilizing and everything. Whereas like, again, like the sweet spot for benzos, it's like I don't feel anything, I don't feel anything, I don't feel anything. Oh my God, it's 8 hours later and I'm in a jail cell. Like there's that sweet spot. So craving benzodiazepines is craving that fabled tiny sweet spot where you trick yourself into believing that you can exist for several hours, where you're feeling the drug, but you haven't lost control of your senses. And, you talk about with, other drugs like, heroin or crack or ecstasy or whatever, you crave that first high. I'm not one of these people that is like, you get these people who are always like, oh, the first high is always the best high. I mean, that's kind of stupid. Like, I thinking of like my favorite experiences with all these drugs that I used in the past. I don't think any of them my first time were the best time. I mean, it was like the first time, it was like, yeah, the first times were usually very good and very exciting. But like once you've used it more and figured it out and can take higher doses somewhat responsibly, like, I don't know, what was I even going with this? Oh yeah, so you have like the fabled first high that people chase with drugs. And then for benzos, it's like you have this fabled sweet spot that people chase. And when I say that it's like a placebo, it's like, how do you even know that you're in that sweet spot? Maybe placebo was the wrong word to use, but yeah. You get the same thing with a sweet spot for kratom, because one of my big criticisms of kratom is that it's so hard to hit that sweet spot. And um, so yeah, it's like I don't feel any kratom. I don't feel any kratom. Oh, I've had too much and I feel nauseous and all these bad things are happening. So, but yeah, like because I mean, yeah, like kratom, there's affinity on the opiate receptors when you're dealing with kratom. So a lot of people that have used kratom a lot will say that it's just as addictive in the sense of habit forming, not addictive in the sense of destructive, destroy your life or whatever, but habit forming, needing to keep taking it every day. Kratom is just as addictive as opiates in that sense, heroin, opiates, whatever. Um, and part of it is that affinity, but part of it is just that, that chase again. Um, but yeah, so um, kratom addiction isn't, and I think the fact that kratom is disgusting, whereas heroin tastes amazing in the back of your throat. If kratom tasted good, like that's kind of a weird thing to say, but I think like if kratom tasted good, um, it would be a stronger addiction. Whereas if heroin was disgusting, it wouldn't be quite as addictive. If anyone can understand that. What about regular powdered cocaine? There's a lot of people out there that like they'll all they ever do is smoke weed and drink. I mean, that's just it describes so many people. They'll just smoke weed and drink, but occasionally some of them will once in a while they'll go out and buy cocaine or they'll buy ecstasy, and for recreational purposes. And that's always how it's kind of been for me. I've never like had a like bad run with cocaine. It's always just been very spotty once in a while for recreational purposes that I've encountered it. Um, but it is like that next level because everyone at some level, some more than others, but everybody kind of gets a rush off of being a rebel or breaking the law, and it plays on the ego, and you don't really feel like you're doing anything necessarily rebellious when you're doing, just smoking weed through a weed dealer or whatever. But when you actually like dedicate, I'm going to go buy cocaine and do it. I'm going to buy a hard drug and do it. I'm going to buy something with raised stakes in the legal sense. Um, it's the thrill of the chase. The thrill of the chase in a lot of cases is just as satisfying as the actual drug high. So it's like it's that stepping into a different version of yourself for a couple of days, namely a person who's going out there and committing crimes at a higher level, and just getting involved overall with darker stuff. And so that plays on people's egos. A lot of people enjoy that feeling. And I mean, I'm not, I'll admit, maybe a lot more in the past, but like, yeah, it's cool to be edgy and doing hard drugs or whatever. So people talk about cocaine like as a high as being a very egotistical drug, more so in the sense that it makes people socialize and be chatty and confident or whatnot. But it's also egotistical just in the sense that a lot of the times there's an ego investment in just simply deciding to obtain the coke and do it. It's also satisfying for people. We can also briefly touch on anabolic steroids. Um, there's not a drug. People who don't really know, like, there's not like a drug high associated with any anabolic steroids. And a lot of the stuff, like roid rage, is extremely overblown and is limited to mainly, a couple of drugs that affect you in the androgenic sense more. But nonetheless, if you've used steroids and then you stop, you do crave them, and it's very much the same of, say you have a video game and a computer and you play that video game on your computer all the time, or it could be a gaming system, whatever, and then you get a new computer, a better computer, a faster computer, and you're playing the same game, but you're playing it it feels so much more satisfying because it's just, it's just working better on the computer. And then that computer breaks and you're stuck trying to use the old computer. And you're frustrated playing the game because you just can't enjoy it because the quality is suddenly back to what it was, which relatively just feels really bad. And it's almost like you lose any desire to engage with this game that you once extremely loved on that old computer. It's the same thing like if real life is a game and if going to the gym is a game. It's the exact same type of thought patterns that would happen in parallel with the computer example. Ecstasy, MDMA. What is it like to crave ecstasy? Well, I would say that of all the drugs out there, ecstasy is the one that you crave most, literally for the drug high, because it's so good. It's the best drug high out there. Good ecstasy. And so, yes, a lot of ecstasy craving is craving the drug high. So you do get into this because you know about the crash and how much the crash sucks. So it is kind of like looking, weighing the pros and the cons, because you know there's the crash, but you want to feel that high so bad. And you'll have this tug of war in your head that eventually moves to the side of, let's do the drug and deal with the crash. So, yeah, so craving ecstasy, there's that mental battle going on in your head amid the craving. But then there's also, like, when I talk about, alcohol as being something to direct your emotional state. Heroin might be like the ability to direct your ability to get through the simple things in life without falling apart, victim to your own emotions or whatever. Stability in a practical sense. And ecstasy, it's like kind of the similar type thing, only in a social sense. Like, it's the only drug out there that like actually makes me feel extroverted, and it makes everybody else around you feel extroverted too. So you crave it because you are craving being able to exist as that quote unquote normal person with respect to socializing. Yeah, so like at times where maybe you are feeling lonely or awkward or whatever, and you're caught up in your memories or whatnot, you'll remember how good you felt in your own shoes and everything while on ecstasy, and you'll crave it in the sense that like you just crave that old version of yourself.